basically we went over there thinking that we were going to solve this, like, why does it cost so much money to send money to Africa problem, right? And what we realized really quickly, and sort of to your point about like TransferWise and some of these other companies, is all of these companies solve the same problem, which is they move money from the global West to developing countries, right? To, parts of Africa, to South America, to, Southeast Asia, right? None of these companies actually focus on the experience or what goes on the ground in these emerging markets, right? And so what we realized pretty quickly once we got there is, hey, the world doesn't need another remittance company, right? But Nigeria needs a way of actually being able to interact with the local economy if you have crypto, right? And so instead of trying to build a remittance company, we just built an exchange where you can actually buy and sell crypto locally, right? How do you actually on and off ramp into this crypto ecosystem from the local economy?
Welcome back to another episode of the Hypergrowth Experience. I am your host, Nima Gardide. Today, we're going to hear from Chris Maurice, who is the co-founder and CEO of Yellowcard, a transparent B2C crypto exchange that's focused on the African market. It's very similar to Cash App or Coinbase, and they've scaled to 16 African countries quite quickly. It's an interesting study of how product market fit really pulls you in, and you're able to scale up your user base. It was very interesting to hear Chris's journey of discovering the specific problems that the African market had with transferring cash from different parts of the world. It is one of those sort of very obvious use cases of crypto that has been sort of the main use case and the sort of the original use case for the scale of the platforms and the scale of the currencies. And I must admit that this happened right after the FTX crash, and it was my first time going on one of these podcasts with someone and discussing an issue that was sort of a hot topic, but then realizing that I'm not a journalist and I'm not the best at maybe being very direct and asking these harder questions. So it was a good learning experience for me, but we did touch on security at these types of firms. It seems like they have fully outsourced their security, which in a sense is probably good. They've gone after a few firms that specialize in making sure that the funds are safe, and they're mostly sort of like a marketing layer and a distribution layer on top of these ecosystems, which if I were to start a company in this space, I'd do a similar sort of thing. And in the US, I think Coinbase has fully done their own work and are protecting people's funds, all the way to Gemini, who's going through issues doing similar stuff with their own product. So there is definitely a whole ecosystem and a whole set of questions that we could have explored on the security side and the fun parts of what's happening in this sort of ecosystem. But as always, the Hypergrowth Experience, we focused on the story behind the growth of the company, and I'm pretty excited to have you hear it. It's a very different market, very different approaches to growth than sort of your normal quote unquote Web 2 product. Chris begins with sharing how he got into the crypto game super early on.
It was the international payment aspect, right? So hadn't made any money off crypto at this point. In fact, maybe I shouldn't say this in case my mom listens to this, but in fact, the only sort of experience that I had in terms of like the financial aspect of crypto was, like I said, I was all in. So I was like, I'm going to dump my savings into this. And my mom had control of my savings account at the time. And so I was like, Mom, I need, I had like $5,000 in there that I'd saved up from like selling Pokemon cards and all that. Right. And I was like, Mom, I need all of that money, to buy magic internet coins. And I bought at the time would have been like 20, let's call it 21 Bitcoin. Um, and I just had it sitting on a hot wallet online, and somebody got
Oof.
into the account with no 2FA
Oh
and just
no.
all of my Bitcoin. And so
Classic.
that was my only experience in terms of like the financial aspect of Bitcoin at this point, right? So I was fully sold on the idea and the tech. I had actually lost money. So,
Yeah, that's like, I feel like there's so many of those stories. I had a friend right in around 2016, 2017. He had this USB with him with the wallet in it, but it was one of those USBs where you have to have the right combination, the physical combination on it for you to be able to actually connect it. And he had already maxed out his tries. He had one more try and he didn't remember the code. And there's something like 100 plus Bitcoin sitting in it. He was
oh,
going nuts. I think he lost that money. I don't think it ever came around, but he must have felt awful about that. I think at the time he thought it was being smart by having it like a non-custodial wallet on his USB key with this code on it. But he lost, a couple $100,000 in today's probably dollars now by doing that.
good God.
So many of these stories.
Yeah, that's I mean, man, we did God, I lost my entire savings that I tried to keep in Bitcoin, which in hindsight was a good decision. It was good to move all my money into Bitcoin. I would have done really well
if you had the
so
right
I'll
security
take
measures
for the
in place.
decision, but and then man, what else? We screwed up. So this was also about the time that Ethereum was coming out, right? And you could actually start mining Ethereum. Why this is like circa 2015, 2016, after the pre-sale and everything, right? And and so Justin and I, we pooled our like collective money together to buy a mining rig, right? And we were like one of the first, miners on the Ethereum network, right? And on this like $200 mining computer. And we accumulated, I want to say like, let's call it like 30 ETH, right? Over the course of, relatively quickly, right? And pretty low cost, right? We weren't really paying for the electric and all that, right? And all this is obviously, before like the chain splits and everything else, right? And one day he starts smelling smoke. And the CPU had popped. And of course, we never backed up this wallet, right?
Classic.
So everything's just sitting on this hard drive. So that's it's so funny, like looking back, the amount of money that like, because everybody assumes, oh, you get into Bitcoin early, you must have a lot of money, and it's like, well, I do in theory.
You would have in theory. It's interesting. So you were messing around, and this is your friend from college, and you ended up starting a company with, right? Justin?
Yes. Yeah. So I met him right before college. We were volunteering at a camp in Mobile, Alabama. And we met there, and then both ended up going to Auburn.
Right out of college, you started this company. So what was the inside there? So you said you were attracted to the financial side. What was it about the, let's call it the fintech innovation part of blockchains that what was the first use case that pulled you in?
Yeah, so it was really the international payment aspect, right? And so at the time, like I said, I was doing some sales online with like trading cards and that kind of thing. I was also, especially in like the beginning of college, I was doing writing. I was writing ghost writing, writing for different websites and all of that. And yeah, it just, any time that you're dealing with international payments, it's really a pain, right? And I mean, I remember, some of these websites that I would write for would pay me through like Western Union, right? Which is, just a terribly inefficient way of having to do things, right? Having to go, fill out forms and collect cash and then go deposit that cash in a bank account so I can actually, buy cheeseburgers or whatever the hell I was doing, right? And so, and so, like crypto, that was really the initial attraction, right? Is it's like, hey, even from the early days, just pay me in Bitcoin. I can cash this out immediately on, at the time, Circle or Coinbase, right? And then that's it, right? And it's so much easier. And that was like sort of that sort of real world use case is what really attracted me to it, right? Yeah, I think like the price speculation was cool, but I mean, obviously at the time, it's like I think anybody would be lying if they said at the time they actually thought it was going to go to like 60K at one point, right? I mean, I still remember when Bitcoin hit 10K, I was like, this is like the greatest thing ever, right? It's never going to go higher than this. And so yeah, it was. I mean, it was really that use case that attracted me to it more than the price, right?
That's an interesting problem where I think at the time, transfer wise, there were like other solutions that started popping up for the international solution, the problem of transferring funds. But again, all of them had this, and they still do have this problem of like there is multiple middlemen in the process, and they're all taking a slight cut, and it's wildly inefficient, or someone's taking risk actually, right? So like if you use TransferWise and you send money from the US to, let's say, Nigeria, there are at least like I think 1 or 3 parties that take on some risk for about 24 to 72 hours before the transfer clears, right? So there's an interesting process of decoupling from all of that infrastructure that was needed when we first created the financial system. But that can definitely change with crypto. And so that international variation took you to create this company. So tell us about Yellowcard. What is it that you guys do? What was the first version? What is it now? Has it changed since you started? What's happened?
Yeah, it is. It has changed quite a bit, right? So I think the initial idea that we had when we were starting this company was we were going to take a gift card, put it in CVS, Walmart, places like that, and then you would be able to walk in, buy this gift card, redeem it for crypto, right? And so we start building this out. This is like, let's call it end of 2016 into 2017 now. We start building this out, and we're probably a year into building this. And one day I meet this Nigerian guy at a Wells Fargo who's sending $200 to his family. And the bank charged him $90 to send $200 to Nigeria. And I was like, wow, that is absurd, right? There's no way that should cost that much, all of that. And I talked to this guy and basically, said, hey, have you heard of Bitcoin? It's, it's free, it's instant, it's fun, all this great stuff. And I go home and I just start thinking, what is this guy's mom going to do with $200 worth of Bitcoin? Right? Like we've solved the middle of the problem, but then, you can't pay your rent with that, right? You can't buy food with it. Even in San Francisco, you'd have a hard time, living on Bitcoin exclusively, right? Especially back then, right? So I don't think I knew where Nigeria was on a map at the time. They don't teach nearly as much about Africa as you might think they do in the Louisiana education system. But I set out to I set out to understand everything that I could, right? And I start doing all this research and trying to understand the space, right? And eventually I come to the conclusion that okay, if I actually want to understand what's going on in Nigeria or Africa more broadly, then I just need to talk to somebody from there, right? And so I put out this ad online that said, looking to speak to Nigerian men, which in hindsight, I probably could have worded better. And I end up talking to this guy, right? And we kind of hit it off. And this is why I tell everybody that Nigerians are the most convincing people that you'll ever meet in your life. Because within about a month and a half of meeting this random Nigerian man on the internet, he convinced me to go get my passport and take the first international flight of my life. So like I said, I'd been on a plane maybe 4 times in my life at this point. And this guy convinces me on a 6-day-old passport, no visa, no shots, on a one-way ticket to fly to Lagos and basically move everything that we were doing over there, right? And so spent all of our money on this one-way ticket and literally landed in Nigeria with the options of make the company work or live in Nigeria for the rest of my life.
So you all moved there. You and your co-founder went in there. What was the pitch? Like, what did he tell you to convince you to move to Lagos?
What did he tell us? Not nearly enough that in hindsight it should have convinced us. That's I mean, like it's so funny. It's funny because it worked out, right? Obviously, like if it didn't work out, then it wouldn't have been as funny. But like it's very funny in hindsight because like I sent him $500 of Bitcoin in advance to like reserve the hotel and to like, get tickets to like this conference we were going to go to and all of this, right? I sent this guy that I have never even FaceTimed with in Nigeria $500 of Bitcoin, right? And it didn't even click for me until the day before leaving. Like, oh wow, I should probably at least FaceTime this guy, right? So as I'm packing, I call him on FaceTime. And he answers and he goes, Chris, what do you need? I'm getting a haircut. And he's sitting outside in the barber's chair. He's got his, like the bib on and everything. And I was like, man, I'm gonna be honest. I just needed to make sure you were a real person. So what did he tell us? I don't know. Apparently, I guess like 20-year-old me didn't need much convincing.
Yeah.
And so I don't really know what he said, but it worked.
So you moved there, because at this point you've decided that you're going to solve this international transfer problem, and then usage of, if I'm holding Bitcoin, I should be able to live with that money. Was that the sort of new idea at this point?
That was basically, yeah. I mean, basically we went over there thinking that we were going to solve this, like, why does it cost so much money to send money to Africa problem, right? And what we realized really quickly, and sort of to your point about like TransferWise and some of these other companies, is all of these companies solve the same problem, which is they move money from the global West to developing countries, right? To, parts of Africa, to South America, to, Southeast Asia, right? None of these companies actually focus on the experience or what goes on the ground in these emerging markets, right? And so what we realized pretty quickly once we got there is, hey, the world doesn't need another remittance company, right? But Nigeria needs a way of actually being able to interact with the local economy if you have crypto, right? And so instead of trying to build a remittance company, we just built an exchange where you can actually buy and sell crypto locally, right? How do you actually on and off ramp into this crypto ecosystem from the local economy? And that's really, I mean, what we figured out is it's like, wow, Bitcoin is actually a much better way of sending money across the world, right? It's much more effective. It's much cheaper. You get a better rate, all of that. But then again, what are you going to do with it locally, right? And so that's the problem that we ended up really setting out to solve, is the local side, as opposed to focusing on sort of the US customer experience.
And so it's an exchange in that I can grab my Bitcoin in my wallet and then transfer it to a local currency that I have, and then transfer it to my bank account or just use it. So you were solving more of a consumer problem as opposed to sort of like a financial trading problem. Does that sound correct?
So yeah, I mean, you can think of the product as Cash App or Coinbase, right? It is Cash App or Coinbase for Africa, right? In that, you go on, you load money, right, through any locally applicable payment method. So in Nigeria, I load Naira through bank transfer, right? In Kenya, through mobile money, through cash, right? And then I can buy and sell crypto, right? So I can buy Bitcoin, I can buy USDT, I can buy USDC, right? And then move it anywhere in the world. Works the same way in reverse. So, hey, I need to, I'm in Nigeria, my friend is trying to send me money, right? Western Union's not a great option. TransferWise is not a great option. You get a terrible rate, right? So how are people doing it? They're doing it through crypto, right? And so you send crypto to that wallet, and then you can cash out to a Nigerian bank account, to a mobile money number in Zambia, right? Wherever you need that money, you can just, we spit it out to you.
Gotcha. So Nigeria was the first market, and now you've expanded to all these different areas of the continent, sounds like.
Yes. Yeah. So now we're the largest exchange on the continent. We're in 16 countries total. Nigeria was first, but we are in 16 African countries now.
That's super cool. So let's talk about the early days. So what was the first? So you've discovered this problem. You moved to Africa to build it. How did you first grow the exchange? Like, what did you do to get the first set of users for it to begin with?
Yeah. So we actually launched in June of 2019. And at first, I mean, it was just like, hard, painful growth, right? It was like, tell your friends and get your friends to tell their friends, right? We didn't have any money for marketing. We didn't have any money for, any type of promotion, right? We had a little bit to like grow the team a little bit, but not for much of anything else, right? And so it's just, hey, tell your friends and they'll tell their friends and, then everybody's happy, right? And I mean, looking back, it's like, I mean, it's almost embarrassing, like how bare bones the MVP of this product was, right? I mean, you could basically in Nigeria, you could give us Naira and then tell us where to send the crypto. There was no wallet, there was no sell feature, like there was nothing else. It was just an on ramp at that point, essentially, right? And so, yeah, it was really a matter of like, okay, let's get as many people using this as we can, right? And then just listen to what they tell us, right? And so the first thing they said is, well, look, I can buy crypto on here, but what if I need to sell it? And so, okay, well, let's add that feature, right? And so, we worked on that, added that feature. Well, hey, I'm new to crypto. I need to buy it because, my friend is asking for it or whatever, but I don't have a wallet. I don't know how to set one up. Okay, well, we needed to add in a wallet system, right? And so it's really just iterating based on customer feedback, right? I mean, the product was nowhere near where it should have been when we launched, right? But frankly, that's okay, right? I think it's okay to look back and be embarrassed by the MVP as long as you're willing to sort of adapt to what the people that are actually using it tell you, right?
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense, and I think like expanding your product in order to match more use cases is just a clear way to grow as well anyway, right? You're now expanding the number of people that can potentially use the product because you're solving more of the different nuanced use cases in the general problem space, right? What is the so you could first buy the different tokens or different currencies, eventually could sell them. How do you, so you guys are out of school, know about crypto. How did you solve the security problem? Like, obviously there is a lot of that going around right now in exchanges, and Coinbase is regulated and there's all these people doing audits. Like, when did you start thinking about, oh, wow, there's a lot of money being exchanged in the system. How do we structure it in such a way that is secure?
Yeah, so I think the advantage that we had going in is, like I said, we've already kind of taken our beating in crypto from a security standpoint, right? From like losing all that Bitcoin and the Ethereum and everything else, right? And so going in, it was like, okay, this has to be secure, right? And we've learned our lessons on how to do that. And so, I mean, really, the main thing for us was, okay, we obviously do not have we as a small startup are not going to be able to build the most secure wallet in the world, right? Like, let's be honest about that. And so instead of trying to build it ourselves, what we did is we went out and partnered with, at the time, BitGo, and now Fireblocks, right? And so, basically what we did is we went out and said, okay, like, who has the best institutional grade security for crypto assets, and how can we work with them, right? And so essentially all of the wallets on the platform were just whitelisted, right? Or white labeled wallets for BitGo at first, and then now for Fireblocks, right? Because as far as we're concerned, they are the experts when it comes to security for these assets. And we could spend a couple $1 million trying to develop a system that would not be as good as theirs, right? And so, yeah, we work with them and just sort of, ride on their security and their expertise and their technology from that standpoint.
That's interesting. So you've kind of like outsourced this problem to another company whose sole purpose is to make sure they get this right, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially from like the wallet security standpoint, right? Now, so for us, there's other security implications, right? We have bank accounts, we have we have a web app, we have a mobile app, we have things like that could also potentially be exploited, right? And so yeah, I mean, so from there, it was a matter of really just expertise, right? You wanted to bring in the right people, right? So we brought in two people that we really thought could help. And I mean, over the course of the past year, right, since our CISO joined, we've made pretty tremendous strides in terms of security, right? And so that's really, I mean, look, cybersecurity is always, it's a matter of sort of how do you say, prevention, detection, all of that, right? You can't stop everything, but the goal is to make sure that when something happens and make sure that you can stop any bleeding, right? Mm-hmm. And so anytime that something happens, we have tons of mechanisms in place to make sure that they have access to very limited anything, right? They have access to no user data. They have access to I mean, you set up honeypot wallets, all of that, right? And so it's set up in such a way where even if something were to happen, they would not be able to get to anything of importance, right?
What's a honeypot wallet?
Essentially, like you set it up, like it's essentially, how do you say? It's like a wallet that if somebody can get into the system, then it's like they can take that, right? So it's like you kind of set it up, and it's like, hey, okay, cool, you won. Here you go. Here's
Is it like a bait?
Yeah, it's like bait, right? It's like, hey, you got in, right? So, here you go. This is like the easy grab, and, leave everything else alone, right? Everything else is behind further layers of protection and all anyways, right? And so it's like, hey, this is, this alerts us that something's going on. And yeah.
How much of this security apparatus that you've built is externalized in order to create trust in the app? Like, do you feel like as a consumer that wants to install the app and use it, do people care about trust? Are they like holding a lot of cash on your systems, or they're using it in transient? Like, do you think trust essentially is a big part of it? Has that changed since the crypto ecosystem has gone through these, especially this year, of, what is the phrase people in crypto use? FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. When there's been more of that around, do you feel like that's reduced growth for you, has made it harder? How has that changed the way you've been thinking about growth?
Yeah, so the recent events in crypto have actually helped us pretty significantly, because we are the only company on the continent that's actually put time, energy, and effort into sort of the blocking and tackling, so to speak, right? Like the compliance, the security, the legal, the licensing. We're the only exchange on the continent that's licensed, right? We have licensing in 7 countries. We're the only exchange that, at least as far as I'm aware, right, that has a actual dedicated security team, right, and a CISO and all of that, right. We have, we actually have a dedicated compliance team, right. We brought in the woman that was running all of Africa for MoneyGram to run our compliance team, right. We have a dedicated legal team in house, right, and so we invested quite a bit in building up like the how do you say, the security, the compliance, the legal licensing, all of that. And the bet was that eventually people are going to care about this. Of course, I did not think that it was going to come in the form of, a 30-year-old stealing $11 billion from the industry. Right. But, we'll take it any way we can get it, I guess. Right? And so, yeah, all of a sudden people care about it, though. Right. And so it actually matters now that we have this stuff. And so that's helped pretty significantly. Right.
Interesting. So it's almost been like a positive outcome for people who then trust your system better, and come in and become a user. So that's interesting. So tell me about how the structure of the growth team works. Like, how are you going after users? Is there a growth team separately? Is there a marketing team? Like, tell me about the org on trying to grow this app from the early days, I assume there was like a point where you had enough features where then the market obviously grew in the size in which you could go after. There's you became a full exchange, and that took a bunch of product development, and you want to scale it to millions of users. Before you started doing multi-market stuff, I'd love to hear that story of like, how did you first start growing dramatically in the first market, Nigeria, and then how are you thinking about opening up markets?
Opening up new markets was part of the plan from day one. And so we launched in Nigeria. Obviously, we were focused on Nigeria at first, but the plan was always, hey, we want to move as quickly as we can to other African countries, right? And I think that that's something that we saw differently than, still any other exchange that's operating, but certainly any exchange that was operating at the time, is that the continent is bigger than just Nigeria and South Africa and Kenya, right? There's 54 countries, and there's a lot of opportunity across the continent if you're willing to look at it, right? And so, we launched and things took off, slowly, but we're growing in Nigeria, right? And I think we did maybe $100,000 a month, right, to start with in early like June and July, and then by November we were sort of planning our rollout in South Africa and Botswana, and at that point we were doing about 100K a day, right? So we had grown. 100K a day is still nothing in crypto, right? But, we had grown well at that point.
Well, that's like 30x growth in a few months. That's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But it's, it's 30x from like $1 to $30, right? So, and so, it was good growth, right? But it's, we still had a long way to go, right? And really though, what really set it off, and what I like to say is where we went from plain startup to like actually like, oh shit, we have to run a company now, was when COVID hit. Right. And so around March and April, the world is ending and everybody is locked down. Nobody's allowed outside their house in some countries, and everybody turns to the internet for payments, for jobs, right? For everything. And all of a sudden, we have this influx of users, right? Especially people receiving remittances, right? All of a sudden, a lot more money is flowing back because people in the US are getting all these stimmy checks, right? So all of a sudden, you got all this money flowing back now. And so we see this influx of users, and we go from like maybe 100K a day to like $1 million a day, right? Over the course of like 2 months. And so that was when it was like, oh crap, okay, now we have to figure out what we're doing, right? And so that was when we really started having to hire, right? Having to think about like, okay, we need a fully fledged marketing team, right? It can't just be like one guy that we had just our CMO at the time who's like, that was it, right? It was just him trying to do stuff. Right now it's like, okay, we need like an actual marketing and growth team. We need a real dev team, right? Like our CTO cannot be the only one coding, right? We need a dev team. We need customer support, right? We need, all of a sudden it's like the team goes from being maybe 7 people to 30, 40, right? Because it's like, crap, we have to hire all these positions, right? We have to actually figure out what we're doing for all this stuff, because now we have this influx of users, and what else, like, what are they going to do? And so
you just needed to support the traffic that was coming in at that point. And were you only in, sounds like you were in 3 markets minimum. Were you in more markets at this point, or were you just in Botswana, South Africa, and Nigeria?
So Botswana, South Africa, Nigeria were definitely the 3 markets that were doing volume at that point. I want to say by April of 2020, we would have also been in, let's say, Zambia. We would have been in Uganda. So I want to say we would have been 5 markets at that time.
Interesting. So you effectively had one marketing person doing all of that work. What were the initial tactics? And then it sounds like there was like a market shift, and you were one of the players that had a decent product in the space, and then people were sort of flocking to it, which is a great space to be in, or a great place to be in. What were the tactics that you all were using in the beginning, and then how has that changed since?
We, again, had no money for marketing. So it was all sort of either viral marketing or social media, posts and like share this with your friends, or it was, hey, get a couple bucks if you refer somebody and they trade and things like that. Right. I mean, this was when we rolled out like our referral programs and other things that we could do, not completely free, but essentially free, right? The idea of the referral program is you don't get paid unless you refer somebody that does something, right? And so, yeah, I mean, we started rolling out these programs, and I mean, especially in Nigeria, we had people where their full-time job would just be using their referral link, right? And so, and I mean, even today, you still have that, right? And it's not just us; that's like relatively common in Nigeria and other certain other countries, right? Where it's like you can get people who will just do that full time if the referral program is paying enough, right? And
they'll just go out there and find users for this thing, and they'll tell them, hey, there's this app, Yellowcard.
As long as there's something in it for them, they will essentially be your, like, I don't want it, not unpaid because we're paying them the referrals, right? But they will be your like sort of part-time salespeople, like working on commission, right?
Are there limits to your referral program, or you were just letting it rip? Yeah.
So some people did really well off the referral program. At the time, we had an employee that was referring people on the side, which I don't know. I guess back then we certainly didn't have any policies, right? And it was, it was a true startup. Now I'm sure like probably would have to be like, hey, that's not really cool. But he referred so many people that he was actually making more money off referrals than he was like working.
Wow.
And so, that was the kind of stuff that like tipped us off, like, oh, wow, we are like paying out quite a bit. We have not really implemented many changes though since then to the referral program. So it's still like uncapped. It's still, we have better like fraud detection now, right? So you can't like refer yourself and, things like that. Right. But, yeah, I mean, look, if people want to refer their friends, especially in Africa, it's pretty, how do you say? It's like, it's definitely part of sort of the culture that like, if I'm going to refer somebody to you, then I expect something in return, right? Like I expect, hey, if I'm going to refer somebody to sponsor your podcast and they're going to give you $1,000, well, what's my cut, right? You're going to kick me something, right? That's very common. And so, yeah, I mean, really, I mean, even till now, it's like we want a program that encourages that to, come to us, right?
Yeah, so you're tapping into this culture. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like the referral programs that have worked well, there's always these folks that are on the edge of using it in a fraudulent way, but actually they're providing a lot of value. So you want to let them be in the ecosystem, where they are basically acquiring customers for you, but they might be doing work that you should be doing. There was a period of time, and I don't know if you all have dealt with this yet, but there was a period of time where there was arbitrage to be made in how much money you spent on Google ads and how much money Uber will give you back. And so people are running ads on the Uber keywords themselves with their referral codes and riding around San Francisco for free because it was just cheaper to do it like that, where you fronted the capital on Google, you were really good at running Google ads. And so you ended up making money on the spread, and then so driving around at a massive discount in San Francisco. And so maybe some of that is happening. I don't know if you've all dealt with like people trying to bid against you on these networks, but it's an interesting space to be in. But usually it happens when the referral system is useful and that people end up using the product afterwards, and it's working very well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in the early days, right? The exchange rates on the platform, a lot of it was updated manually, right? Because I mean, again, this is like a bare bones MVP, and yeah, you could always tell when the exchange rate was outdated, because that's when all of a sudden, volume spikes, right? All of a sudden it's like, wow,
Oh my
where's all
God.
this traffic coming from? Well, people are smarter than you, right? And a group of people is smarter than you, right? It's like,
Yeah.
one person versus, a couple thousand that are, checking this out. And as soon as the rate is, sort of below market, then it's like, hey, all of a sudden, volumes have spiked, right? So,
Wow. So people were finding arbitrages on your network. And so what happened in those? So did you lose a lot of money in those scenarios where people are exchanging and you just can't fulfill at the same rate on the markets?
not a lot. Actually, so funny enough, what we did to combat that is there was this one guy. I'm not gonna say who it was, but there was this one trader on our app who we knew was like particularly good at spotting these arbitrage opportunities. And so what we would do is any time that he would log in, we would be alerted, right? And we would go check the rate, and then that's and sure enough, like that was pretty much how we beat that system, right? Is we had like this one guy. We never told him, obviously, but like we knew that this guy was looking out for these ARB opportunities and was really good at finding them. And so just any time that he would log in, it was like, okay, hey, this guy's logging in. Let's make sure that
alert someone.
Yeah, tell somebody to check the rate.
Human push notifications. Like there is someone who's figured out that something may be wrong. So I assume that's all automated now, and
it is all automated now. It's been automated for a while now, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, we literally went from plain startup to having to run a business, right?
Mm-hmm. So what was that first? So you went from like 6-7 people to 40 or so, and you're all early in your experience as founders. What was it like going through hiring that many people? How did you learn how to structure the organization? Was there a lot of like trial and error, or did you have advisors? Like, how do you go through this first stage of growth? And I'd love to hear specifically about the marketing and growth team. Did the CMO there hire everyone underneath them? Do you have a separate growth function versus a marketing function? How did that team come about?
Yeah. So I wish that I could tell you that we had this like grandiose vision and we executed on it perfectly, and this is how it happened. But it was really just all trial and error, right? I mean, so we were hiring people at the time, and I mean, we had a hit rate of probably like 1 in 10, right? I mean, like we were not doing great at first, right? And then that was about the time that we started like working with a recruiter and kind of like we formalized the process a little bit more. And that was when we actually realized the value of recruiters, which is like, oh, wow, we have a full-time job, and like hiring is just more to do on top of that versus like, this person that their only job is to find good people. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, at the time though, we did not have a good hit rate. Right.
And when you say hit rate, is it like people you were giving out offers to and accepting them, or you're just going in a lot of calls with folks that were not high quality?
No, I mean, like people were joining the team, and then we would find out like, oh, this guy is working 3 jobs at the same time.
Oh, damn.
Right. Like stuff like that. Right. I mean, yeah, oh man. Yeah. We have like some horror stories from the early days. Right. But like it's stuff that we didn't even realize that you have to watch out for when you're hiring on the continent, right? Because like, I mean, in the US, it's like, if I hired you to do something and then it turns out you were working 2 jobs, then it's like that's like fraud, right? I mean, that's like theft almost. It's, and like if you're working 2 full-time jobs at the same time during the same hours, right? Like, we're not talking about like working 1 during the day or 1 at night, right? And yeah, I mean, it's like if you don't stay on top of certain people, they will just work multiple jobs and they will just not do anything for you until they're told to. And if you don't stay on top of them, they'll just go work somewhere else and get paid from all these places at the same time, right? And so it was a combination of like we had to learn how to manage across cultures, right? How to make sure that that we're appropriately managing the people that we're bringing on. It was how to find good managers, right? It was, oh man, just a number of lessons learned the hard way, right? But I think the key thing that we learned from that time though is that, again, we might have had like a 1 in 10 hit rate in the early days when it came to like people actually working out. But the ones that we found that were good, it was like they were really good, and most of them are still with the team, right? And so it's like the people that were really good, we like to, we made sure that we were rewarding, right? And we made sure that, we were keeping them happy and that they were encouraged to stay with the team. And then the people that did not work out, we made sure to move on from quickly, right? And I think that's really, that's, for any startup, right? It's like, that's really the only way to do it, right? It's like somebody either fits into a startup culture or they don't. And if they don't, then you need to move on quickly. And if they do, then you need to make sure that you reward them and keep them happy and keep them on the team.
Yeah, 90% of people not working out is extremely high. I'd never heard that before, but it makes sense. There's like cultural differences that you hadn't accounted for, and then you learned the hard way, it sounds like, on how to go around them and vet people in a whole culture that you're not from. That's interesting. So you went through this first part of growth. Like, tell me about how you're doing growth now. It sounds like you've kind of ridden a couple of waves, which is extremely useful, right? There was like the COVID wave, and now there is this FTX wave that somehow is helping you, which I thought was not going to be the case. So, and that always helps for growth. But what are the systems behind what's working now? Is it just market expansion and using your referral system as the main lever? Are there other channels of growth that are working out? And how are you thinking about the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, realistically, right? I look at the position we're in. So we raised Series B earlier this year, right? We have plenty of cash, we have plenty of runway, into past 2023 into 2024, right? And then I look at the market around us, and it's like, oh wow, we're in a significantly better position than, never mind crypto, right? We're in a better position than most fintechs on the continent, right? In terms of, the amount of money that we raised, when we raised it, the amount we have on hand, all of that, right? And so, yeah, really, when it comes to thinking about the next 12 to 18 months, it's just continuing to ride that wave, right? We're in a position where, again, like some of our competitors are laying off, 25, 50% of their staff, right? And we're not necessarily, we're not growing the team by 100x, right? But, we're still hiring, right, where we need to, right? We're still, growing the team a little bit, right? We're still spending on marketing. We're still spending on, these other growth levers, right? And so, that's really the big thing for us is like, okay, look, we played our cards right. We're in a good position. We have some cash. We have some runway. Nobody else really does. So we're not going to go overboard, right? We're going to kind of maintain course. We're going to, keep doing what's working, and just sort of ride out this wave into the next bull market, right? The only thing that I would add to that is that we're in sort of a unique position on the continent where it's not even, I shouldn't even say like riding it out to the next bull market, because the market cycles don't matter a ton, right? They matter like some stuff hurts us, right? Some stuff does not. But like regardless of the market, people on the continent need to be able to make payments, right? Inflation is not slowing down. People need to protect their savings, right? People need to be able to receive remittance. And that's really what crypto is solving. right? And so we have a much more practical sort of user and platform than say a Coinbase, which is, or I guess Binance would be a better example, right? Which is largely speculative.
And so I guess two questions on that. One is your business model, is it just like an exchange where you make a cut on the transaction? So the transaction volume matters for you greatly. Does that sound right?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, yeah, volume matters, right? We make more in certain countries than others, so volume's not always the perfect indicator because the margins can be different by country, right? But the breakdown of like the volume and where it's happening certainly matters, yeah.
And so are you charging some like fee, or are you doing some form of arbitrage where you give out a specific, let's say, exchange rate, and then you go and clear it at slightly, like how is this transaction volume thing making you money?
Yeah, so there are fees and spread and that kind of thing. All of that gets baked into the price that the customer sees, right? And so we provided a more detailed breakdown if that's what they want, right? But yeah, I mean, from a user experience standpoint, we try to look kind of like we talked about earlier. We try to make sure that nobody has to do math, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that's like one of my bigger pet peeves with some other exchanges is it's like, okay, you get to the checkout screen or the confirmation screen, and it's like, well, now all these numbers are different, and there's this fee and that fee and everything, right? And so we try to just upfront, hey, this is the exchange rate. This is exactly how much you'll receive on the other end, right? And then we give sort of a breakdown of how we got to that number, but we try to do all the math for you, right? And so I think it's a little different. We're not trying to hide any fees or anything like that, right?
Yeah, so it's all out in the open, which is good. And then so you're saying you're spending on marketing. So the referral channel was the original path for growth, and then you ended up going after some other paid channels. Are there restrictions in the African market for running ads on crypto? Has that changed over the last couple of years? And what is the channel composition? Tell me about the African market. How do you acquire users on these ad networks?
Yeah, I mean, so there's, I guess to the initial question, there's not really restrictions. No. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's not really crypto regulation or anything like that in most of the markets that we deal in, right? And that's a big part of our pitch to the regulators when we meet with them is, hey, people are doing this. People are going to continue to do this. Do you want them to do it in a safe and regulated environment? Or do you want them to end up, going to FTX, right? Which is, I mean, it's, people are going to end up there one way or the other if you don't allow this, freely and openly on shore, right? And so, yeah, I mean, there's not really restrictions, right? And so, yeah, I mean, look, we don't do anything necessarily out of the ordinary. I would say the one thing that we do uniquely well that matters is, so there's digital ads and there's, billboards and all that fun stuff, right? But then the one thing that we do well that really matters is the ground game. Right. And I think when it comes to like, how do you acquire users on the continent? There's two steps. There's the awareness step, which is obvious, hey, somebody has to have heard of you in order to want to use you. Right. And then there is the education step, which is a little bit more granular. Right. And we take two approaches to that. One is we have an entire Yellowcard Academy, right? Which goes over everything from, never mind crypto, just like financial basics, right? How do you save money on an irregular income? Things like that, right? All the way to more advanced, like explain DeFi, what is the 1-inch protocol, right? All of this, right? And so, yeah, we cover a lot on the Academy. But then the other thing that we do on the ground is we actually host events and we host activations and meetups and all of that in each country that we work in to invite users to come out and ask their questions, to meet our team locally, right? To see that, hey, this is a real company that has real people on the ground, right? In the country, right? We have an office in each country that we work in. We have a registration. We have a local bank account, all of that, right? And so... Yeah, that's the part that we sort of do uniquely well that I think really matters on the continent is that like local ground game.
And do you have offices multiple places in each country, or is it just the major cities? Like how have you done that? And is there like a clear ROI that you've like calculated? It just makes sense to do these events, or it just was originally like a community thing that's come about as a growth lever? Like how have you been thinking about this part, allocating capital behind these offices?
Yeah. So we typically only have one office per country, right? And it would be in, the major financial center, right? So, Lagos or, Nairobi, right? What I would also say though is, look, we have 200 and just over 200 people on the team in 21 countries. And I hate going to an office, so I'm not going to make anybody else go to an office. Right? And so, the offices in these places are, we're not talking about like massive offices, right? We're talking about like dedicated co-working space, right? Like WeWork style. So it's not, that's of everything that we spend money on. That's not what's going to do us in, right? So, I think that's all fine. And it helps again for, being able to host events and things like that. It helps with, how do you say, sort of neutralizing those costs. But yeah, in terms of the ROI, what I would say is that if you do it right, these events don't have to cost much money, right? You're, basically telling people, hey, everybody come meet up at this place at this time, right? We'll buy some pizzas or, some food for everybody that shows up. And that's really about it. Right. And then it's just a matter of like people hanging out, getting to ask their questions, getting to understand, what is crypto? Why should I use it? Why should I use Yellowcard? How does it work? All of that, right? And we'll get significantly more signups. And in my opinion, even more valuable than the signups is the feedback, right? Because if 50 people show up to this event and 30 of them complain about the same thing, well, okay, obviously there's a problem here. We need to fix this, right? So let's find the bug. Let's squash it, right? And so these events are, it's more than just customer acquisition, right? It's also really how we figure out, hey, this is where things are not working perfectly on the app, right? Hey, there's a problem with, the display rate in Zambia, right? Okay, cool, let's go fix that, right? Or, hey, in Botswana, we had multiple people complain that when they put in their wallet address, it says that it's invalid, right? Okay, let's go fix that, right? So that's also part of the value, right, of these events is that it helps us with that user feedback, right?
Yeah, you have like a direct conversation with the users, and that's very useful in these scenarios. Do you have like a different app per country and a different code base, or is it all the same singular app people can download and use?
It's all one app. Right now, it is a unique experience by country, though. So if I'm downloading this app in Nigeria, then I'm going to have my sort of unique Nigerian experience, right? I'm going to see Naira as the base currency. I'm going to have Nigerian payment methods available, et cetera, right? So based on your location, it's changing the experience, the currency, things like that. But it's all one app, right?
And are your product and engineering teams separated per market, or is it like per function? How have you organized the product development?
No, product and development all happens centrally, right? And so, because like I said, it's one app, it's one code base, all of that, right? And so the idea is that anywhere that we find these issues, they get thrown to the centralized product team that puts it together, and then the dev team fixes it, right? And so yeah, we try to avoid with like how do you say, like things like marketing, development, legal, stuff like that, right? To the extent that we can, we try to avoid making it super country specific, right? We try to have diverse teams from across the continent that are available in this essentially pool of resources, right? And then in each country, we have a country manager, right? And we have leadership for operations in the country. And then they have access to this just pool of resources, right? So if they need help with legal, well, we have a great legal team based across the continent that can help, right? Things like that.
Gotcha. And are you supporting all these different languages in these different countries? Like, are you fully localized, or are you just using the most common language, which I assume is English or French?
Yeah, so we support a number of local languages, right? So yeah, English and French are. I mean, look, with English and French, you basically reach the entire continent, excluding North Africa, right? But even in North Africa, there's a ton of French, right? And so between French, English, Arabic, Swahili, we have a couple of other local languages in like South Africa, Rwanda. You can reach essentially everybody, right? And so we are working on adding more and more support, right? We've added in support for, I mean, even like Somali, right? And language and countries that we don't support yet, we've added in support for the languages, right? And we're constantly working on sort of improving that and making sure that that's available on all, assets, right? So we want that available on the web app. We want that available on the mobile app. We want that available on the academy, right? We want it available everywhere, right? And so we have an in-house team that handles the translation mainly for French, right? And yeah, the French and Swahili, and the goal is to make sure that that's available everywhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense when you're trying to grow across a continent of people speaking all these different languages, that this is like a huge growth lever to tap into, because you're trying to go after, as you expand the percentage of the market that's willing to use this product. I would assume that you would want to almost even have the academy eventually in all these different languages. And
100%. Yeah. And that's the goal, right? We want everybody to be able to use it in their native tongue, right? Regardless of where that's from. Now when you're talking about, several hundred languages just in Nigeria, then, it becomes more and more difficult, right? But, we're doing our best to support the main languages, right, in each country, and try to get as granular as possible, right? So, we want Setswana on there, we want Zulu, we want Hausa, we want all these different languages, right? And so for now, again, English, French, Swahili, we cover basically the entire continent with that. But we do have I think we're up to 10 languages on the web app and the mobile app, and then working on like the academy and things like that to get all that translated as well.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. All right, last speculative question for you. I think I don't know how much you follow financial markets. I assume a lot, given that you're in it. How are you thinking about the recession? Do you feel that in the next, it seems like the general consensus is that there's one coming, and let's say second half of 2023. Do you think that's going to change the dynamics of how people use crypto? Do you think that's going to slow it down, speed it up, change the transaction volume on your network? How is that going to affect the ecosystem, do you think?
Yeah, everybody seems to think that we're heading towards one. I don't know why people don't think we're in one right now, but especially
we were in a technical one. We were in a technical one. We're out of the technical one. But yeah, I think we're going to be in another technical one basically in 6 to 8 months or something like that.
Yeah. And so, look, what's the impact on crypto going to be? It's hard to say, right? I think that overall, I think that crypto booms when there is a lack of trust in the financial system, right? And I think that we've seen that, in a couple of points, right? And so I think, if it starts to go that way, right, then it's very possible, right? If inflation doesn't get under control, then, hey, look, I think that people will continue to move into, crypto and all of that. That being said, the first thing that people do when a recession is on the horizon is sell off everything for cash, right? And so, similar to what we saw like right as COVID was hitting, when Bitcoin dumped to 3,000, right? It's not impossible that we see something like that again, because everybody's dumping their coins because they just want the cash, right? And they want to be safe. Hard to say, right? I think when we look at like our exchange specifically, I don't think that a recession will have a tremendous impact, right? I think we'll see I think we'll see sort of the normal impact of like, hey, people are sending a little bit less money home, right? Businesses might not be doing as much business. But look, overall, I mean, a lot of countries on the African continent are in almost like a permanent recession, right? Inflation is out of control. The economy is completely dependent on oil, or it's completely dependent on another natural resource that's not doing too hot. And so, I mean, this is largely business as usual in a lot of countries that we're in, right? And so we'll see, right? We'll see what the impact is, but we don't expect a massive impact. If anything, I mean, it's another reason why people need to use crypto to actually be able to make transactions and actually be able to move their money around without fear of the financial system, right?
Yeah, so they want to be even saving more money on fees, and so you're kind of a solution to that general problem if they're doing remittances from the West. That makes a lot of sense. Like they're around. I hadn't thought about the recession or the recessive nature of a lot of these countries, and how inflation is really not tamed in that part of the world. I'll ask you one last question, which is, I'm just most out of curiosity about the exchange. Are you thinking that your growth will come mostly from new users coming in on the platform and transacting, or have you seen a lot of growth just come from existing users becoming more crypto native and using it more as they've gone into integrating the app into their lives?
I think it's largely from new users, right? I think that if you're using crypto on the African continent and you're already a crypto user, then at this point you should know who we are, right? We have like I said, we have billboards up in your city, right? We're advertising, people know who we are if you're looking for crypto on the continent. It's really the new people, and it's not just new individuals; it's new businesses, right? It's businesses and individuals that are realizing, hey, this technology is really the best and only way to be able to move money around this country, right? It's look, my business needs to import shoes from China, and we don't have access to the dollar because our bank doesn't give us dollars, right? And the central bank takes months to approve in some cases these dollar transactions. We need our business to continue. We're going to use crypto to be able to make these imports, right? And so same for remittances, right? Kind of like you mentioned, it's like remittances to Africa are still the most expensive in the world, right? 9% on average to send money to the continent, 19% to send money around the continent. Right. So if I'm sending money from Nigeria to Ghana, you're talking about 19% as opposed to 9%. Right. And so when it's like fees are that high, people start to catch on that, wow, there is a better way out there. Right. And it's not always intuitive. Right. I'll be the last person to tell you that crypto is super intuitive and my mom is going to be using it tomorrow. Right. But it's something that when it solves problems the way that it does on the African continent, people come to realize that and they start adopting it, right?
Yeah, this is so interesting because I feel like this use case is talked about a lot of like, hey, sending money around is going to be easier and faster and cheaper. But most people that talk about it, at least in the West, aren't actually experiencing this problem. So they an abstract understand that this exists, but we deal with it. We actually hire out of Nigeria, for instance. We have engineers there, and they constantly deal with it, and they're super aware of the crypto ecosystem. I was so surprised that they all felt like crypto native folks, and they were talking to me about it. Where in New York, where I live, if I'm at a party and talking to people about crypto, they just generally understand that it exists because it's been in the news a lot, and some of them have bought these things and all of that, but they don't really know why, and they just think it's like some scam and speculation. And so it's interesting to see an actual use case in this continent where the problem of moving money around isn't as solved as I think within the US, you can pretty much move money around for free now with ACH, right? So
Cash App and, apps like that,
Venmo
it's solve the problem, right? And so, but no, a lot of other parts of the world still have not solved that problem. And so, I think, where people in the West see Bitcoin as speculative, it has a lot more powerful use cases in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's super cool. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming and talking to me about how you all have gone through the last couple of years. It sounds like it's just the beginning, and you're going to be in 54 countries by the end of the year, right? You got to tell your team.
Oh, Jesus, do what we can, man.
But that's super interesting, and thanks for coming on. And maybe we'll chat again when you're at twice the number of countries, and how things have changed, and how you've been thinking about the next stage of the company. So excited to see and experience the growth you're all about to go through.
Beautiful. Let's make it happen.
All right, and that's a wrap. Super grateful for Chris for spending the time with me on this and telling us his story. It's very interesting to see how some companies, when they catch fire, they become an operational problem, and they have to learn how to scale as fast as sort of the market is pulling them in, and it seems like they've been on that ride for the past couple of years. We've got a next episode coming again with Kareem, who's one of my co-founders. He's breaking down a recent experiment we've been running with one of our clients, Viho. It's our first attempt at going tactical with this podcast and just kind of being in the weeds on what it takes to actually run some of these experiments and learn from them and try to help grow some of these companies. Especially this one is quite interesting because they have a very unique business model. So I'm excited for you to hear that. Thanks for watching and listening. As always, if you've been enjoying these episodes, please comment on things, subscribe to them, and follow us. I'm excited to do more of these this year.